Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order, the Mayor and Board of Commissioners, for May the 11th, 2021. Can I have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Pearson,
Here.
Commissioner Warnick,
Here.
Commissioner Braun,
Here.
Commissioner Shepard,
Here.
Mayor Marion.
Here.
Let the record reflect that all the elected body is independent.
We rise with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you bow your heads with me for a brief prayer? Father God, I come to you tonight on behalf of our town. God, I ask that you watch over our citizens. I ask that you watch over our police department. Lord, I ask that you watch over our first responders and fire and EMS. Please be with us as we're here tonight and be with us as we leave later this evening. Watch over our troops, Lord, that are serving here and overseas, and be with us as we go through this week. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, first is public presentation. I think we can skip the overview town administrator. So we don't have any business meeting items tonight. Citizens input. Is there anyone on, Cal? You're muted, Cal.
The role of Zoom.
I'm not seeing anybody in the waiting room.
All right. Hearing no one. Moving into staff reports. Chief?
Good evening, all. I forwarded to you all the bi-weekly event logs that contain the calls for services. Beyond that, I don't have any further report unless I have any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Town administrator?
There's a couple things I wanted to highlight real quickly. They're sort of intertwined together. One has to do with our MS4 reporting requirements, and the other one has to do with our budget in general. So, as you're aware, there will be an advertisement showing up in the newspaper this Friday for the constant yield tax rate that we are required to do. Essentially, the real estate tax values went up this past reporting cycle. This time last year, the total assessed value of all the property in Rising Sun was $198,768,862. With the next round of assessment, the total assessed value increased by 2.8%. As a rounded up number, it's actually like 2.76, but it rounds up to 2.8 for a current assessed value effective July 1st of $204,266,876. To give you some perspective on that, if you remember when we talked about in past budgets, how significant the town's real estate tax assessment decreased over the years. In 2005, 15, 16 years ago, the total assessed value of the town of Rising Sun was $205 million. So here we are 16 years later, and we're just now creeping up to where we were back in 2005. And if you remember in past budget discussions, we talked about how not having, being in the sewer and water moratorium ended up basically putting a squeeze on the town in terms of any new investment. And we saw that in the decrease in our total assessment in the town of Rising Sun. To put that in perspective, in 2017, our assessed property value was $166 million. So from 2005 to 2017, we had went from $205 million basically to $166 million. So you can see that we're slowly starting to crawl back to numbers that we used to use to operate with that are 16 years of age. So we're, as we talk about, we're slowly climbing our way out of the hole. As as a result of that, as part of the constant yield tax law, any community that is going to keep its tax rate, and right now our tax rate is 0.46 per $100 of value, a community that is going to keep that rate but bring in more than $25,000 of new projected tax revenue has to have a public hearing, and it's essentially treated as a tax increase. So in order to comply with the law, we are going to be doing that public hearing at our next meeting on May 25th at 7 o'clock. And keeping the tax rate where it is at will generate $25,290 of new real estate tax revenue, essentially new money of which to operate on. And so the advertisement's going to go out there. We're going to have a virtual town meeting on the 25th to hear any public comment. I think it's important to sort of highlight, how this all fits together. And what I want to show you here for a second, and let me get to sharing my screen here, is this is last year's budget, just in the general fund budget. And if you recall, last year, we balanced our budget, and I'm hoping everybody can see this. We balanced our budget with a $1,574.34 of expected more revenue than expenses. And we've always talked about this. From a business standpoint, that's not really a good idea. You should be collecting, it depends upon who you talk about or talk to. You should have anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half of annual operating reserve set aside. So when you look at the numbers, with COVID happening last year, if you remember, we actually lowered the tax rate last year. The constant yield tax rate said to drop it down to, I think, 34 something, and we ended up rounding it. The year before, we rounded it down even further. My point being, in 2017, we raised the tax rate to 0.48 for $100 of assessed value. We're currently at 0.46 because the elected body, as we've said in the past, has banked on new investment with our water and sewer and tried to give our residents a break on the real estate tax. And in addition to that, as you can see, the year before, our projected budget for expenses on the general fund was $2.3 million. Last year, we reduced it to $1.9 million. And as you heard in Judy's report, we have tightened the belt, and we've accomplished some new things, but we haven't accomplished all the things we need to accomplish. We're going to come in right around 1.9, maybe 1.87 as our total expenses for this year. But the lesson I'm trying to drive home is we balanced our budget only expecting a difference of $1,574. The next thing I want to show you is we've always talked about unfunded mandates. And one of the more recent unfunded mandates is the MS4 reporting requirement, or coming into compliance with MS4. And basically what MS4 is, it's an EPA regulation, federal government regulation, that gets passed down to the Maryland Department of the Environment, and then that gets passed down to different jurisdictions based upon their size and population. And this past year was the first year that we had to now come into compliance with MS4 requirements. In this past year, we had to come up with $58,000 of new money. And it's an important term that I want to make sure our residents understand is new money. In other words, we have expenses that we always have, staffing and all kinds of different costs that are pretty regular. But whenever we need to buy new vehicles or pave roads or fix infrastructure, that is new money that we have to try to figure out ways to get more revenue, realize more revenue, or lower expenses. And so we have new money that's going to be a part of this year's budget, and I just wanted to go over that with you. So what you have here is, as a result of the $58,000 we spent this past year, we had to send a report in to the Maryland Department of the Environment that basically it's a calculation on how many acres or how many acres of restoration you have to do, which is basically stopping bad stuff from getting into the Chesapeake Bay. And what I mean by bad stuff is stormwater runoff when it rains. The rainwater picks up maybe it's road salt from the wintertime, salting the roads, oils and different chemicals that come out of vehicles, stuff that people might wash into the drain, things that might leach off the land, agricultural issues. We've all read in the paper about people that have concerns about free-range chickens and stuff like that. All that stuff, one way or another, gets into the Chesapeake Bay. And in order to clean the waterways up, they have this MS4 requirement. And what I like to call it is every 5 years, you have to reduce your environmental nutrient footprint by 20%. So it's a calculation that basically says over a 5-year period, we have to spend some money and reduce our negative environmental impact by 20%. And so there's a variety of ways you can do that. Some of the big ticket items that give you more bang for your buck is to either build stormwater retention ponds or fix stormwater retention ponds. Those can cost, millions of dollars. The other thing you can do is stream bed restoration, which at times doesn't cost quite as much, but unfortunately it also doesn't give you as much bang for your buck, because if you can imagine, the best way you're going to get bang for your buck is not letting it get into the streams to begin with. And so when you do stream bed restoration, you're basically eliminating pockets of sedimentation that can build up by allowing the stream to be able to free flow without doing a lot of erosion and causing more problems. So you get more bang for your buck when you build stormwater ponds or fix them. You get a little bit of bang for your buck if you do stream bed restoration. You get very, 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 very minuscule credits if you do public outreach and if you do some tree planting. So between now and December of 2025, we have to reduce our environmental footprint by 20%, which comes out to an equation of we need to get credits worth 29 credits based upon everything we do. And so what we are deciding to do is to do a stream bed restoration, because when you're dealing with other things that have to be fixed, believe it or not, you can have streams that run on somebody else's property, and although we are responsible for reducing the environmental impact, it's still on somebody else's property. So you got to work out easements and agreements. And when you're talking about stormwater ponds, most of ours are owned or not owned by homeowners associations, and they're supposed to be doing those repairs. And that's a whole other issue that we talked about before. So in order to make it so we're not up against the gun, we made a decision to do a stream bed restoration at the sewer plant. Because as you can see, the stream bed restoration will get us to 28.6, and we only need to get to 29. So we could do some tree planting and some other minor stuff to get the rest of the way to 29. But the more important thing is we control the land. So it's a lot easier for us to be able to come into compliance. Now the problem is the total cost of this restoration is going to be $1,671,300. And I just had KCI crunch those numbers again. So these numbers are new as of this morning. So that means by December 31st of 2025, we have to have spent 1.6, basically $1.6 million. So if you remember, we balanced the budget on a $1,500 surplus. The year before, we balanced it on a $15,000 surplus. So it begs the question of where is this money going to come from? And so maybe it comes from grant money, but the state has not really positioned itself yet to make those kinds of money available. So what I asked KCI to do was to break it down over basically a couple budget cycles here to try to figure out exactly how it would break down from year to year. So in fiscal year 2022, there's one thing we absolutely have to do, which is this sort of pinkish color, $37,000, which is what it costs for us to update the report on an annual basis. So we have to spend that money no matter what. Now, if we want to get started on this stream bed restoration, you can see that it's sedimentation up here in the green. It breaks down exactly what these expenses are. So you have sedimentation sampling that has to be done for $6,000, concept, limits of disturbance, access approach, that's $8,000, NRI, FSD, that's $15,000. Some topo that has to be done is $40,000. So we can spread this pain out by trying to budget this portion of it for $69,000 this year. And then next year, we have a total of $157,000 that's going to go into design, the engineering design to do the stream bed restoration. If we break it out over a 2-year period, this is what I'm showing down here below. We can do the $69,000 now to do this original stuff, and then next year we can budget the design and permitting. That's what the two up here, 78 plus 7,500 is 86,150. We could budget next year to start setting aside the monies for the design and permitting over a 2-year period. But then the construction is what really gets expensive. And if we can either wait until the last minute to hope we can get the $1.4 million of money, or we can figure out a way to develop a revenue stream that starts to bank that money aside over the next 4 years to start to generate that. In all total, what we really need, because we still have the annual reporting, and these numbers are a little bit fluid here in this line. I have to go back to KPI to see if there isn't anything that runs, it's good for 2 years. So just to play it safe, I basically added 5% to this year's expenses over the next 4 years. But our $1.6 million costs, including our annual cost of being compliant with our reporting, actually is $1.8 million we have to have between now and December of 2025. So I just wanted to get that on everybody's radar because we need to start thinking about this. Now, the other benefit of doing it the way I'm talking about, doing it is doing a little bit of it this year and then trying, when we balance our budget, we basically need to start peeling off money and putting it in a bank account, so to speak. Unfortunately, I don't know where we're going to get $482,000, in essence, over the next 4 years. I don't know how we peel that out of our real estate tax where we're already just balancing a budget with $1,500 surpluses and we have all those other needs. And as you know, we already reduced staffing this year. We're running on less public works, less administration, and, hypothetically, less police officers. So we can't continue to do that. We got to fill those positions, going forward. So we've got a little bit of an issue here, but the benefit in doing it the way I'm suggesting here, little by little, is that KCI has spoke to some people in the state, and they believe that a grant is probably going to look better if we have done some of the work ahead of time. Instead of coming to them and saying, paying you these $1.6 million, if we have shown due diligence and done some of this work ahead of time, they believe it will strengthen our grant application. Now, here's the flip side of it, and I'm not suggesting that we do this, but there are times when some agencies take the attitude of just throw yourself at the mercy of the court, and somebody has to come up with some money. And, folks like Augie and, Augie especially, you've been down that road in the past of not fixing your sewer plant and how nasty that can get going down the road. So we probably should be proactive. But I guess I wanted to throw this out there now that we need to realize that $25,000 we're going to get by keeping our tax rate the same. It is technically a tax increase for those people whose properties are appraised at a higher value. But if other people, their property remains the same, it's not a tax increase. And if their property value drops, well, then they're technically going to pay less in tax. But it's a difficult thing for us. I know we're always very careful about what burden we put on our residents, but we're running out of room to keep, paying, Rob and Peter to pay Paul. And this really comes home with this MS4 requirement. So I just wanted to get that on your radar so that you understand that. Does anybody have any questions?
No, thank you, Town Administrator.
Okay, that concludes my report.
All right, moving into the mayor's report. My report is very brief. A little less than a week ago, we started another fundraising campaign for this year's 2021 Senior Banner Program. We are just shy of $3,000 for this program. The banners will be hung on lampposts lining the streets of the town. We're asking people to donate through our Facebook fundraiser to send the seniors into the next chapter of their lives with memories of, their community supporting them, especially during these trying times. There will be, because we're such a small community, there will be two, and the class is so large, there will be 4 seniors on each side, like we did last year. But I know that we've gotten a lot of great support from Rising Sun High School. I just want to send a shout out to local business Shepherd Design Company for all their hard work on putting that together again this year. Also, last week, we had a visit from State Secretary of Health Dennis Schrader. Town Administrator Bonenberger and Chief Peterson represented the town in meeting with Secretary Schrader. He stopped to thank Stone Run Family Medicine and Dr. Joe Widener for all their efforts to prevent the transmission of the coronavirus. We also send, on behalf of our board, our deepest appreciation to Dr. Widener and his staff for all their efforts during this COVID-19 pandemic. The last but not least, prom was delayed this year, but the town of Rising Sun stepped up and also helped Rising Sun High School to help offset the cost of their prom. We continue to build strong bonds with our schools. Prom was rescheduled for, I believe, the 21st. So we look forward to seeing some great pictures, and I know the principal will be reaching out to us to send a huge thank you to us. Moving into commissioners' comments, Commissioner Braun.
I have no report.
Commissioner Pearson.
I just want to say thanks to the DPW for kind of doing the best patching that they could on Pearl Street by the middle school. It is getting worse. We know it's getting worse, but we're dealing with it. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepard.
No report tonight.
Commissioner Warnick.
No report.
All right. Upcoming town meetings, we have May the 25th and June 8th. As a reminder, Sunfest is always the first Saturday in June, which is June 5th this year, from 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. Town Hall will be closed on Memorial Day, Monday, May 31st. You can see the trash, recycling, and yard waste calendar as well. Is there anything else to come before the board this evening?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's also Law Enforcement Appreciation Week.
Okay. Yes, a huge shout out to not only Chief Peterson, but our entire police force, as well as all the officers throughout Cecil County. Thank you for your service, especially during these trying times. So thank you, Chief. Anything else to come before the board this evening? Hearing nothing, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.